According to an excerpt from author Chris Whipple's new book, The Fight of His Life, President Joe Biden told a close friend that Vice President Kamala Harris was a, quote, work in progress. Biden was also reportedly annoyed at Harris's husband, Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff, for complaining about the assignments she receives as vice president, saying Biden wouldn't ask Harris to do anything he wasn't responsible for in his 2 terms as vice president.
Coming for Doug even.
Yeah. So, a work in progress. It's not what I would love to hear my president say about me if I were vice president, but it's not the worst thing in the world. That could maybe perhaps is an honest assessment of someone who's growing into the role. The question is she actually growing into the role and showing improvement?
Well, and first things first. Did he? Is this on the record in the book? He did. I don't think it is. Right. This is back talk, or I heard it from someone who said it. Heard someone who said it. Kind of fire and fury type stuff, right?
Yeah.
So we don't know what he actually said, but it wouldn't surprise me if Joe Biden is under impressed with Kamala Harris. I mean, he picked her, not for the reasons of her remarkable political talent, clearly.
Right. He was very explicit about the fact that he was going to pick a black woman president long before he, as a vice president.
At least a woman.
Didn't he say black woman as well?
But wasn't it down to Kamala, or I thought Amy Klobuchar was legitimately in the mix? Well,
what had happened was once George Floyd happened, right, and Amy Klobuchar had a connection to the police officer involved, had previously had a case of police misconduct that she was the prosecutor for and had returned him to the force. That ended her aspirations. But,
yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah, I think, so you're right. Maybe it wasn't exclusively black women, but that was the implication, especially once George Floyd protests started emerging. And Biden framed it as though this is what the black community wanted and this is what we were going to give. Right. And certainly there were a lot of elite black tastemakers in the media who were clamoring for this. I think a lot of other folks had some other substantive demands.
Kamala Harris herself having a policing and prosecutorial background.
Correct.
Just like Amy Klobuchar.
Correct, which is something you weren't allowed to say in certain polite media circles back in 2020. But here we are, and this Mediaite article goes through some of her less distinguished moments in her vice presidency, namely the awkwardness around an interview she gave about being assigned to the southern border. And apparently she complained about having that assignment, partly because of the negative exposure that it got her in this interview. The do not come and all of that came out of that assignment.
Well, she never visits the border.
Well, that was part of the issue in the interview. They were asked, are you going to the border? And she gave one of her classic sort of word salady answers that got her in a lot of trouble. So, look, I think that Biden is probably right that every vice president gets some unsavory jobs, and it's not necessarily easy. And I will credit Kamala Harris with the border being a difficult issue for her to negotiate. However, I think it's also fair to say that she's negotiated those issues with less skill than similarly situated vice presidents.
She hasn't really endeared herself to the public very well. Joe Biden, when he was vice president, I think was broadly popular.
Sure.
Was pretty well liked. Not that he necessarily did a lot. Honestly, it sounds like his foreign policy instincts within the Obama administration were better than the advice that Obama was getting from Hillary Clinton, that he unfortunately took with respect certainly to Libya and some other issues. So you can see how Joe Biden, without necessarily even setting out to gear himself for a presidential run, I think he was very much on the fence during that period and then ultimately decided to bow to Hillary Clinton, which ended up being a colossally bad decision because he's a much more popular political figure than Hillary Clinton. I think even people who despise him have to concede that.
Correct.
Similarly, Kamala Harris is being set up to be Biden's successor, whether anyone wants that or not, because by virtue of being the vice president, she will have this platform to launch a bid whenever that is. I expect it to be in 2028, not 2024, but whenever Biden is exiting the political scene. And she will be contested because she is not particularly popular. Yeah. And she has all this baggage from not having really achieved anything on her own. So and she's going to be vulnerable if she does end up being the nominee.
Yeah.
So, if you're I don't know what Democrats are doing, frankly. If you're a Democratic strategist, if you care about electing Democrats, Joe Biden's your guy. I see why you'd be all excited to have him for as long as you possibly can. He just had a huge victory in the midterms, but eventually you're going to have to there's a good chance you're going to have to make do with her, and they're making no effort whatsoever to have her be more popular. Yeah,
and Kamala, she wasn't a senator for very long. She doesn't have a very long record there. Unlike Joe Biden,
she won in this year and this year and this year and this year. Joe Biden's been winning elections since I don't know, since our grandparents were toddlers or something.
Literally. I mean, he was like the youngest congressperson ever at the time. So look, a lot of people have argued that part of trying to reorder the Democratic Party primary and putting South Carolina first is not just for Joe Biden's benefit, but to set the stage for Kamala Harris, who has a very steep uphill battle ahead of her if she ever decides to run for president. The hope being that because the endorsement advice of people like James Clyburn in the state is so influential with the Democratic population there, that she might be able to get an early win with South Carolina in a way that makes her seem like a plausible candidate that pushes out any prospective challengers in a way that wouldn't be the case if she were obliged to, win Iowa, which is not a thing that I imagine her doing in a million years.
Yeah, but she's gonna have a lot of just like that. There's gonna be a lot of power on her side. There's gonna be a lot of institutional weight carrying her over the line, and but she could face a real challenge from.
Can I get past this? This is the clip of her being asked by Lester Holt on NBC. Do you have any plans to visit the border? Straightforward question. Kamala's response. At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
And that day is every day. It's my favorite quote.
Look, I think she actually seems like a nice person. I say this over and over again. There was one clip toward the very end of her primary campaign where she put out a video of her cooking Indian food with Mindy Kaling, and she seemed to come alive. And hearing her talk about something that she's genuinely knowledgeable about and cares about really spotlighted how little she seems knowledgeable about, or maybe even cares about some of the political tasks she's tasked with. I would love to see her in a context that makes her thrive and blossom and makes her a genuinely happy person. I have no ill will against this woman, but I don't know that running for president is going to set her up for that sort of success.
You know what I think she should do?
What?
She should beat up on woke people sometimes. She should make fun of... that's what Obama does. He does that. It works.
I don't care for him very much either, Robby.
But he's the most successful political figure of our lives.
For him doing this in his sunset years, where
he did it. No, he did it as president as well.
When did he beat up on woke people as president?
He would. When he gave college commencement speeches, he'd be like, "You should listen to dissenting views. What's all this?"
That's not beating up on woke people.
Just a little bit.
Listen to dissenting views is in fact what free speech advocates on the left, like Noam Chomsky, have been talking about forever.
She should make fun of Stanford. She should make fun of the harmful language elimination list. That'd be a good idea.
Well, Kamala Harris.
Free political advice. Don't listen to me.
If you're listening, the options are on the table. We'll have more Rising for you after this.